Part 1, Chapter 17, From Darkness. There I stood, breathing lightly through my nose, slight huffs, brief and dense. The face I wore was a satisfied, minimally crazed expression. A strange sensation of ants burrowing into my skin covered my body. The old man stood in the doorway. Our eyes met. I saw him in a different perspective now. Not a terrifying thing hiding in the shadows, but as something else, something I can't quite explain.
"How do you feel?"
He asked me, though I had the feeling he already had the answer. Bound. My skin's elasticity seems to be gone, and yet I don't have any problems moving, if that makes sense.
There are many changes in this form, and you will come to understand them in time,
he said plainly. My legs were heavy, and the rest of my body strained, constantly fidgeting and readjusting my feet and arms, all the while feeling my body with my hands, amused and intrigued by these odd sensations. So, with this power, I can do anything I want, I sneered. Right now I was calm, consciously planning every detail of my revenge. In this state, I felt like myself, but not the Kim that dragged her feet through her daily life. I was more than that. I was the person I imagined myself to be in my daydreams, confident, untouchable, and superior. But there was this cockiness in my throat, a spiteful tongue that licked the back of my teeth. I was still me, just another version, one I had locked away and occasionally fed emotional scraps to. However, I couldn't shake this tickle in my brain, like jostling wind chimes swaying back and forth, a hum harmonious and aware. What do I call you, old man? A sinister tinge burned my tongue.
They call me Sin.
I snorted. Sin? That's hilarious. A bitter pause held my words. Mental tripwires prevented me from continuing thoughts so easily. Will I ever be myself again? My tone reticent.
You will recede. The demonic parasite simply shares your body and comes forth when you give in to those petty emotions. They are called tuffle.
As if awaiting its introduction, this presence made itself known. Inside my head, I could hear something, scratching, digging. Something deep inside my brain reverberated like the wing beat of a fly. Undulating in the dark room. Just barely noticeable, but once noticed, impossible to ignore. He walked up to me and rested his hand on my shoulder. The previous icy touch of his skin was mute to me now. He spoke gently.
Kimberly, you are no longer alone.
With that, Sin vanished completely. At that moment, a stabbing pain erupted in my head. My hand shot up and took hold of the sides of my skull as it thrashed in place. That sinister bite I employed moments ago was ripped from me, and I felt more like my usual self. Look what we have here. The voice greeted me through a static filter. I swallowed hard, suddenly feeling small and skeptically observed. I watched my body move on its own. Arms rotated themselves, shoulders spun and cracked. This body of yours is frail, she said. She was quiet. Her voice sounded like 1,000 different tones mashed and ground together with an electric distortion layered over it. Every word pounded my head like a drum, causing a rippling headache that drowned my head in a deep wave of pain. Immediately, my boasted confidence shriveled under the scrutiny of a truly superior force. You're a demon. My demon, I stated frightfully. Shut up, she demanded impatiently. Shut up? I mumbled. She screeched. Don't waste my time! An electrical surge shot through my spine. My body became numb and heavy in an instant. I fell to one knee, convulsing and panting. I could feel her energy swirling and pressing against my bones. The strain took hold for what felt like minutes when, in fact, it was almost instantaneous. My shaky knees lifted me to a standing position by her will. It was time to move. I carried my weight to the doorframe without hesitation, and I noticed something. The frame, as well as the sink and a hanging photo on the wall, seemed to be a little lower. They were unchanged. In fact, I had grown taller, maybe 3 inches or so. I also noticed that my limbs and torso had become much thinner, lanky. I let loose an evil grin, thrilled to be in this form, and walked out the door. Confidence overcame me as I indulged in the comforting darkness. I placed my fingertips on the wall and slid them along as I made my way to my room, humming softly. Reaching the open door, I peered in and noticed nothing in here had changed. He was still there, leaning against the wall and unconscious. I took one step in, and the vibe was instantly disturbed. The latent energy emitting from my body tipped off his subconscious and stirred him from his deep slumber. A sharp intake of air, he raised his head with a slanted face. He groaned at first, slowly but surely sinking back into this world, unaware of what was truly happening around him. Eyes fluttering, he reached up and placed his hot forehead into his palm, wincing.
Ugh, my head.
He straightened his back with a hefty exhale and looked forward with glazed, numb eyes. I stood in his peripheral inside the doorway, just a blur to him, but recognizable as the only other person who would be in this house. He chuckled a little and shook the daze away, mimicking lucidity as best he could. He gazed toward my shape.
Kim, that you? I had the most fucked up dream.
His words slurred.
It was so creepy, I can't really explain it.
He then rubbed his neck and noticed the crusted substance on his hands. Reacting to the peeling, dried blood, he examined his arms.
What the hell? Is this blood?
He softly exclaimed. Reality came crashing down right on top of him. He frantically scanned his environment, trying to get a feel of his surroundings. Then he looked up toward the previously blurred figure that stood before him. But his vision was no longer clouded.
Kimberly?
He sounded normal now, afraid. I stood tall in my new glory. Dense black hair waved in front of my face, partially obscuring the demonic purple glow of my eyes.
You're not Kim.
He panicked. Hello, Alex, I snarled playfully.
How do you know my name? Who are you?
Terror gripped his throat.
Oh, that hurts my feelings. You don't recognize your own child.
He looked so confused and said nothing at first. After a brief moment of contemplation, he responded.
No, that can't be. You're not my daughter. You're one of them.
One of them, I thought, then quickly disregarded his comment. My devilish grin switched to fury in a second. Then darkness surrounded his eyes with icy realization.
No. God, no, please. Don't tell me you...
The demon spoke.
She's mine now, Alex. We are going to have oh so much fun together.
His brows angled.
You let her go right now.
It's too late. For her, for you. All that's left for you to do is die at my hand. So we can move on,
the demon hissed. The sanity I held so dearly shattered into little pieces. My mind disengaged all reason and forgiveness and focused entirely on negativity and the unfiltered desire to relish in snapping every bone in his body. I took a few steps closer, chortling under my breath until the madness ruptured and grew into boisterous laughter. He didn't move away, just watched as I approached casually. I abruptly stopped. and then lunged with a rock-solid fist and punched him square in the face, satisfying a years upon years long urge. His neck snapped to the side, but rebounded back to its original position. The first punch wasn't meant to be that hard, but I could instantly see the blood pool under the surface of his skin. Seeing red, more punches followed. He didn't even try to defend himself, as a flurry of fists repeatedly collided with his jaw, cheek, and skull. I stopped, allowing his head to wobble and tilt. My dad was tough. All those stories he used to tell me about fights and beatings came off as horseshit back then. Now I believed him. He withstood some hefty hits and still held his chin high with pride, spitting blood onto the floor and directing a swollen glare at me. He shot a hand forward and took the slack of my shirt, pulling me inward.
Come on, demon. I know you've got more than that. I've been down this road before.
He smirked. My lips mirrored his and accepted his challenge. He dragged himself to his feet, holding my shirt tight and trembling. Eye to eye, he peered down at me with a balled fist at the ready, but he was unable to force it. The demon cackled.
You're not serious. All those times you hit a sweet, defenseless little girl for no reason. Now, when she's a monster, you can't strike her once? Pathetic.
That wasn't me. It was never me, he growled.
I took him by the wrist and applied pressure, breaking his hold with minimal effort and curling his arm down, lowering him enough to press our foreheads together.
She's enjoying this, just so you know.
I threw him back into a pile of glass from the mirror. He caught himself but lodged wide shards of glass into his hands. He forced himself back up to a sitting position and let out a pained sigh, then started panting rapidly. That's when he did the only intelligent thing so far. He looked past me and made a dash for the bedroom door. I let him pass, smiling and determined.
There's nowhere to hide. I won't let you get away,
she whispered playfully and walked, following him. He scampered down the stairs, tripping over his own feet and keeping himself from falling down by using the rails. At the bottom, he made a sharp left and stopped. Looking up, he saw me standing at the top of the stairs, watching with glowing eyes. Without wasting any more time, he rammed through his own bedroom door and fumbled to the floor. I was right behind him, taking my time and enjoying his fear. He crawled along the floor, leaving blood prints and scuffs behind him. About halfway to the bed, he attempted to stand, but was unable to keep his balance. He tripped over his own feet and fell beside his bed in front of the nightstand. Desperately, he scrambled to the drawer and pulled it open. He whipped his head around and witnessed me glide my feet over his blood trail. I saw his eyes avert to my hands as I suddenly jerked. A sharp pain seized my fingertips, uncontrollable shaking, and then fresh blood dripped from under my nails. All 10 of my nails had become pitch black, then grew outward. As they grew longer and longer, they each became jagged and sharp like thin bones. I could feel them pushing out, forming from nothing, and yet extended 2 entire feet out from their origin. It was painful, even in this state, but I didn't flinch. I let them grow until they reached their pinnacle, and once they stopped, I raised them up to meet my gaze.
Beautiful,
I thought. He stared at this display of inhuman modification, his confidence diminished. He then turned his whole body to face me, shoulder propped against the nightstand and legs limp outward. Proudly wielding my new weapons, I closed the small gap between us and watched him intently. The air between us was thick with so many emotions. Impossible to count or consider each one, but not easily mistaken by either party. In one swift motion, I bent down slightly and jabbed my newly formed claws into his gut. A wet, piercing spurt echoed in my ears as his organs ruptured and muscles tensed around the thin daggers. He gave a harsh, bloody gasp and quivered. I felt the warm, thick liquid pool over my knuckles. This sensation was euphoric to me. I leaned in close and whispered,
Do you feel that? That's your blood.
His eyes fell to the floor, half closed and lazy, draining. He responded with raspy exertion.
It was only a matter of time.
I laughed at his pain, blinded by the madness within. To my surprise, he slowly lifted his hand up and reached into the open nightstand drawer. With a chortle enforcing his very last hope, he brought forward his only means of attack and defense. The cold steel of his .38 caliber pressed loosely against my forehead, finger on the trigger, and tears drying on his face. Amused, I licked the strings over my mouth.
Really? You would put a gun to your own daughter's head? What a great father you are,
I taunted.
You are not my daughter. Give her back to me,
he declared with a stutter. For a second, my neck snapped to the side, then reverted back. Deliberately, I placed my skull against his gun just as it was. The ever-shifting control we juggled had been completely stolen from me. I found myself in a ghastly form separate from the current scene. There was nothing around me but shimmering darkness and occasional flickering mist, like little angry thunderclouds floating freely around me. Everything I could see, personally, was nothing at all, and yet still something to me. A blue and purple hue saturated my vision as I glanced around this vast emptiness, listening to the words as they fell from the demon's mouth.
You cannot demand that which you casually abandoned. She doesn't want you. Not anymore.
Her words echoed around me, cementing me in this place for the time being. I was spectral, transparent, and unable to move, but quite able to peek through the non-existent curtains to see what she saw. I felt some powerful urge to sleep, let the world slip away and curl into a ball of miserable peace. But something kept me lucid, attached to the real world. A wretched barrage of regret violated all senses, and, although I was unable to verbalize my anguish, I screamed inside my head, which only proved to vibrate the fabric of this place. It was silent. My non-physical body emitted a shockwave of rebellious texture.
She chose me. She chose hate.
The demon spoke again.
Although it's funny, she's a frightful mess. Right now she's watching this, pounding on the very walls I built to hold her. She may be trying to convince herself that this isn't what she wants, but I can feel it in her heart. She wants you dead.
I ripped my claws out from him, causing him to fall forward. Feeling that motion tug at my own spectral arm, he kept the gun raised, focused intently on his target with the other hand tightly pressing into his gut, holding in as much blood as he could. He snarled,
You're lying. She may be an angry kid, but she cares about me just as much as I care about her.
Oh, tell me how much you care, please,
she snickered. Without a second thought, a reverberating explosion rippled the walls. A dull thud pushed my right shoulder back and tilted my body enough to stagger a single step. Stinging pain spiraled around my shoulder as my eyes latched onto the wound. The stench of gunpowder entered my nose and wrapped around my tongue as the first string of blood drooled down my arm. I laughed, the pain reducing with every second.
You did it!
She screeched.
You actually did it! But you're gonna need a lot more bullets than that to kill me.
I dug the lead tip out of my arm with little care and let it drop to the floor. He just stared, clearly expecting a different result. The gun lowered the slightest bit as his determination wavered. His anger settled, now stewing in hopeless misery.
You don't know what you're talking about when it comes to Kim. You know nothing about her. She's my baby.
Don't I? Then I wonder what this inkling is. The truth of how you sold your unborn child.
Shut your goddamn mouth!
He screamed. Sweat profusely dripped from his brow and tears continued to pool and run over his lips. Out of nowhere, I found the spectral form entirely gone. A harsh blink washed away the burn in my eyes, and I found myself standing in my flesh again, looking through my own eyes without the filter of the demon. A ping of light slingshotted to the back of my mind, cast to the spot where I stood and watched her actions unfold. Her voice came in rippling slaps, furious.
What? How did you? You can't just take over. That's impossible.
The demon's shouting stabbed my ears and blurred my vision. Slowly acclimating, I ignored her and focused on my dad bleeding out on the floor. The muscles that held my arm upright relaxed, and every knot in my shoulders and back untwisted. I blinked again and turned my head to crack my neck once more.
Dad?
My voice was almost normal.
Kimberly?
He jolted slightly.
It's me.
He said.
If you say you're sorry.
My fist tightened. His bottom lip quivered, spirit broken and left to rot in these final moments. The sight hurt me, much more than I ever thought it would. However, a big part of me was cherishing it, a part unrelated to the demon within. I redirected my stare to the side a bit, avoiding eye contact. He sighed painfully, and the world became eerily still.
I was listening. I saw everything. You knew about these demons, didn't you?
His teeth grit and lips quivered. Shame. The demon was feral inside, but I ignored her. All I could hear were blobs of colorful words broken into pieces and reassembled as vague insults. I swallowed hard, the pain in my shoulder throbbing but bearable for a bullet wound.
Explain,
I demanded coldly. He struggled to start, but when he did, his words almost put me in a trance.
Your mother was so beautiful. You remind me so much of her that it breaks my heart.
He seemed to be calm, lost in his thoughts. My chest tightened, causing a disturbance in my breaths.
Rachel is dead because of me.
Because of you? You told me she died from a heart attack.
I practically spit the words in his face.
A lie?
My own palms felt damp, growing sick with anticipation.
That was a half-truth. Rachel and I were close until I got caught up in his web. I lost a friend to a monster, and she...
A lump in his throat as he glared fiercely past my eyes and into the demonic glow. His voice wavered, breathless.
He offered me a chance for her love, forever, and I took it. I had to take it.
He coughed violently for a moment, eyes darting to the floor, walls, and the gun. Then, with dry lips, he continued.
He wanted something in exchange. Something I'd never miss.
Putting the pieces together, remembering what the old man offered me, I stated with a scoff.
Your soul.
His eyes met mine fast, hollow and remorseful.
No. Yours.
I stopped mid-breath, stunned.
He told me to have a child. That was my end of the deal. Have a child for him to claim. So I did.
You offered me up before I was even born? So Mom would love you?
He started to wheeze, words trailing off.
No, you don't understand. I tried to protect you. When you were born, I ran. I took us, the three of us, and moved here to get away from him. How was I supposed to know he'd just follow? He was so angry.
I grit my teeth, the anger still present, rising steadily with every word he spoke. The demon began humming impatiently, loud enough to surface a new headache and break my confident glower. I winced, wobbling a little in place. He continued. Because we ran. I ran. He took her away from me. He crushed her heart without even touching her. She was murdered. All the tears he was holding back broke free, and he started bawling. Through his blubbering sobs, some broken words slipped out. I snapped back at him.
After all that, you still treated me the way you did. You stitched my fucking mouth closed.
I shouted in disgust. I didn't know what to do. I was never meant for love. I was never taught to care for others. When she was taken, I just gave up. Nothing mattered anymore. I never even wanted to have kids, he cried. Slowly, he adjusted his torso position, trying to find a better way to lean that wouldn't kill him so fast. And now I understand something. By killing her, he broke our contract. He had to come after you himself and propose a new deal for your soul. That's why he kept meddling. I wasn't crazy. His words trailed off. I snarled.
You knew he was visiting me? Screwing with me? And did nothing? You goddamn coward.
I never knew it was real. Besides, even if I did, what could I do? He isn't human, Kim. He's something else. I couldn't let him have you. Not after everything. His eyes glimmered with sadness. The emotional stress inside was real. I could see it through and through. He was sorry. My chest rose, breathing intensified. Everything started to make sense. That being said, one thing remained clear to me. His ignorance, giving up, unforgivable.
You abandoned me. Left me in the darkness when you could have helped. You could have been there for us.
My voice came out layered and broken. Whenever I tried to be there, Kim, he messed with my head. You have no idea what kind of monster he is. What they are. But now... He hacked, growing so much more pale. My mind was being torn in so many different directions. It was impossible to clarify or rationalize any particular thought. Instead, they just meshed together. An amalgamation of distrust, fear, and ambiguity. I'm sorry, Kim, he muttered, head falling onto his shoulder. I'm so sorry, Rachel. His eyes were fully focused on mine, absorbing the purple glow, searching for a glimmer of his daughter. My eyes suddenly sharpened, lips spread wide again and oozing evil intent. My body hunched forward, while a thin shell of who I recognized as me was sent hurtling back into an abyssal black. I could hardly see through the demon's eyes now, just rough outlines and blips of light. She was in control again. Her voice skittered like roaches.
Shh. I think you two have had long enough. I almost couldn't crawl under this flesh again.
The demon giggled with fake sincerity. Shaking, the fearful hold on the gun loosened. Slowly, he raised his arm up, aiming the gun at my head, and a new consideration swelled behind his expression. I sneered at him, the demon still dictating my actions. Then, his arm jerked to the side, and the gun was discarded toward the nightstand. His bloody teeth clenched tightly, and his final resolve dissipated. He sniffled, but glared angrily through the tears, strength fleeting. She'll never be truly yours. My little girl is stronger than that. I made sure of it.
Trauma and strength aren't quite synonymous. All you did was install paper walls for me to cut and glue. But don't worry, I'll be the family she always wanted. I'll take good care of her.
She had a different tone now, focused, almost trusting and respectful, a very contradictory manner of speaking. He stared into her black abyssal eyes, searching for any glimpse of me. My arm raised and the claws tensed. I could feel the coming action, the final seconds. He shut his eyes. Kim, be strong. In one swipe, the claw of my index finger tore across his throat, throwing blood in horizontal spray against the wall and in all other directions. One funnel of blood blasted me directly in the face, painting my teeth and neck, while he loudly gurgled. His arms dropped at his side, and his eyes shot open, locking onto me while his neck twitched and pulsed, squirting bubbling fountains of life all down his front. I trembled, the demon's hold slipping ever so slightly. My gaze shifted between the copious amounts of blood splashed on the nightstand and the razored tear across his throat. The layers of skin, flesh, muscle, and bone were all exposed and flayed like shredded wire. Not a clean cut by any means, given the texture of these bone claws. Terror animated, my heart sadistically shook within its brittle cage. Turning in circles, the overwhelming feeling of being surrounded took over me. An invisible cacophony of agonized emotion stabbed my senses from every possible direction, near and far. I glanced at the floor, then the ceiling. A dense cloud of energy surrounded me, and, in that instant, there was pressure behind my left eye, as if a large bug were trapped inside my skull and desperately tried pushing my eyeball out to escape. The burning sensation forced me to swiftly cut my face and rub both eyes vigorously, grumbling in pain. Suddenly I was thrown backward onto the floor. I tried quickly to sit up and stand again, but some invisible force pressed me flat on the floor. Then came an explosion of pain throughout my body. At that moment, I caught another glimpse of my father's face. A dark mist began to fall from his eye sockets, pouring out onto the floor like a fog machine. The smoke rolled along and, with a mind of its own, flowed directly into me and shot into my eyes. A horrendous scraping ravaged my skull, a crackling fire unlike anything I've ever experienced before. The force pinning me released, and I was free to roll into a tight ball as my screams filled the room. My body flipped itself over onto my stomach and started forcefully ramming my head against the floor.
Stop fighting it!
The demon inside me demanded. My stomach churned with what felt like boiling water, causing me to gasp and squirm. Then I took a deep breath and released it in one hefty cough. With that exertion came wriggling black smoke. The smoke encircled my body, floating a foot above for a moment, then instantly shot down like daggers into my eyes. My mouth opened, and I let out a terrifying scream. My body was thrashing around in pain without me telling it to. It seemed as if time were stretching on forever, but ever so slowly did I return to myself again. The nightmare subsided, leaving my spirit shattered and my expression vacant. Both ears rang with silence, eyes wide open, tears and blood trickled down my cheekbones. For a while, I lay there, catching my breath, staring at the ceiling in complete disarray. Every few minutes, I felt a pulse in my spine, and my body would twitch. The only thing that I felt was total emptiness buried in my gut. I tried to move again, and this time my hand responded. All 10 fingers cracked with the gesture, and soon enough my arms were released from lethargy. One by one, my limbs awoke, and I was able to stand again, heavy but upright. The mirror above his dresser dirtily reflected my image. Me, not the devil I harbored. My pale, pasty skin was soaked in blood, and mixed acidic emotions overloaded my brain. Spinning, breaking, casting splinters in every direction. My entire right arm started to shake uncontrollably as I came to an abrupt understanding and fell apart.